To today in the news on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Okunshakin. Let's move straight to the front pages of the dailies and starting with Vanguard. Vanguard is leading with Forex Challenger driving petrol price towards 581 naira per litre. First deliveries of 11 PLC and over others to arrive mid-July. Marketers say logistics of bringing products complex. No fixed price at depot. That's coming from Darkman. You can see that story on page 5. On page 8, I delayed the petrol subsidy removal to allow Tinubu APC win polls. That's coming from Buhari. 10 drowned as boats capsizes in Akwa Ibom waterways. Bodies of 3 medical students recovered in a Calabar boat mishap. On sport, Osimhen beat Merez Salah to win Best African International Arts. On page 8, Salah, federal government declares Wednesday, Thursday public holidays. Shake up, NAF appoints redeploys 98 officers of air rank. Stories above, 19, 12 stockbroking firms blacklisted, set out of stock market. NSA Ribadu vows to subdue insecurity, stabilize Nigeria. We are coming after you. NSCDC reads riot art to oil thieves. Federal government renames airport after Buhari, Usman, Danfodio, Awolowo, and others. You can see the stories on page 9. Tinubu wants stigma on drug use removed. You can see that story on page 27 of Vanguard newspaper. Now let's move to the Punch newspaper. Punch is leading with Senate Minority Leader PDP Atiku said to clash with G5 over Tambuwal. Atiku, a party man will back PDP choice, says aide as minority leaders emerge July 4. G5 backing Jarigbe, Autumn's aide insists. Lawmakers want PDP on Sokoto ex-governor. You can see that story on page 2. There's a photo story here showing a custom CG decorated, promises technology-driven operations. You can see that on page 13. Salah, federal government declares holidays. Osun cancels free train ride. You can see that on page 14. 7 passengers, Okada rider die in Oyo crashes. Tinubu returns today, may present ministerial list after Salah. Lastly, on the front page of the Punch newspaper, above, we have World Bank OK's fresh $500 million loan for the federal government. You can see that on page 5 of the Punch newspaper. Now let's move to the Guardian. Guardian is leading with Bleak Festival, Muslim faithful grown as subsidy removal squeezes family budgets. You can see that on page 6, and we have a photo story of the RAN market there. On page 5, group decries prevailing hardship in Nigeria. Despite Mba's order, Monday sit-at-home persists in Enugu. You can see the stories on pages 5 and 7. Nigeria developing countries at risk of deglobalization. That can be seen on page 15. And lastly, on the Guardian newspaper, we have I delayed removal of petrol subsidy for Tinubu. APC to win election, says Buhari. You can see that on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. Now let's move to the Nation. Nation is leading with discos await next nod to increase electricity tariffs. Distribution firms backtrack on Ike notification. Review not justified, says Yusuf. There's a statement here. It says it is most inappropriate and even insensitive to come up with a price increase of such magnitude at this time, when many households are still struggling to adjust to the phenomenal increase in petrol price. Now on page 4, floating of Naira in order, says Idi Kakalu. Petrol subsidy no longer desirable. Stories above, 7 pilgrims die of psychological challenges, says NACOM. You can see that on page 2. Ex-aid, why Buhari didn't remove petrol subsidy. You can see that on page 5. And lastly, on the Nation newspaper, federal government declares tomorrow, Thursday, holidays for Eid al-Kabir. You can see that on page 2 of the Nation newspaper. And that's all we have on the front pages of the dailies this morning. Join us after the break as we analyze the stories. If you're just joining me, this is Today the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Ogunshakin. Joining me to analyze the front pages of the dailies this morning is Mr. Dayo Akintobi. He's the publisher of Ilu Page Today, Like It Today, and Ikeja GRA Today. Good morning, Mr. Dayo.
Good morning, Damilola. Good morning to all our viewers.
Yes, thank you. I mean, we can see everywhere. I don't know if you are seeing the Salah everywhere.
Yes, Salah is in the air.
Yes.
Celebration time.
Yes, it is. And, yesterday we went to the market and people were complaining about the prices. And apart from that, I was wondering wondering when I was going, and you see inside the yellow buses, you still see the ram and everything. So I was wondering, is this really affecting the people, the economy?
Nigerians, we are such resilient people that no matter how much prices go up, I mean, look at how we've adjusted to higher fuel prices, higher food prices in the market. In spite of all the complaints, people are still buying ram. We eat plenty ram tomorrow, I promise you.
Yes,
Salah to all our
happy Salah.
Muslim faithful.
Yes, and now talking about petrol price, there are strong indications that the national average price of petrol will rise further as marketers have benchmarked cost against the rising exchange rates. And yesterday spoke to some marketers, and they said against the backdrop of the continued depreciation of naira, that deflation will be their cost and also increase beyond figure used in fixing the current pump price. And now they are saying that it's possible we'll buy it for as high as 581 naira per liter. What do you have to say about this?
Well, it's quite possible. In fact, 581 is still a low ball estimate. I think it might even still go as high as 600-700 down the road. The primary problem at the moment, from a layman's perspective, not being an economist, the primary problem now seems to be the scarcity of Forex. Remember, see, two things happened at the same time that had potentially hazardous effects. They took out the petroleum subsidy, and at the same time, they unified the exchange rates. So that immediately put pressure on supply of dollars. So now they've taken out subsidy. They said any marketer can import fuel, but they need dollars to import the fuel because they're going to bring it from overseas. So now that the CBN has unified rates, the official rate, the parallel market rate, they're all one now. There is now not enough dollars in circulation because remember, if you couldn't get it from the CBN, you'd go to the parallel market to buy it. But now, supposedly, quote unquote, in theory, what the CBN can give it to you for is the same thing as what the parallel market will give it to you. So there is no difference anymore. So unfortunately, there is no supply. So these people who want to go and bring petrol in still have to find roundabout ways of sourcing for their dollars. So that dollar is going to be expensive. Even because remember now that they've unified the rates, the official rate actually went up. The parallel market rate came down a bit, the official rate went up a bit. So dollars are expensive to buy now comparatively to the marketers who used to be able to get official rate from the CBN. Now they're going to have to go and buy it at this unified rate, which is more expensive and it's not available. So the long and short of it is going to cost them more to bring the petrol in. And now that there is no subsidy on it, we're paying market rate. So by the time they buy dollars expensively, go and use it to pay for the petrol overseas, transport it in, pay for storage, pay for logistics, pay all that. It's going to cost more. So we're in for a bit of a tough time, that's the truth, because I foresee, well, one good news is at least the electricity tariff that was going to go up by 40%, that has been suspended for now. It will still come, but at least for now it's been suspended. But this issue of fuel, we're not going to see a respite anytime soon. 581, let's get used to it. As we're talking about in terms of Salah RAM, we adjust. We've already adjusted. Some of us are trekking. Some of us are leaving our cars at home. Some of us are using our smaller cars. There are ways to cope, and Nigerians are coping well.
Now, there are reports that they are going to license some of these marketers to be able to import their own products. But according to what we heard and our findings, most of them have not been licensed.
Well, first of all, the licensing regime is not that simple. You have to go through quite a lot of bureaucratic red tape to get licensed. And then secondly, even more than the licensing, as I was alluding to earlier, how about the funding, the ability to source the dollars to pay? The people you're going to buy it from in the Netherlands and all these other places, they will not take naira. They will only take dollars. So you have to, even if you have the naira here, you have to arrange to get the foreign exchange. And when you get the foreign exchange, you now have to go through all of the getting the appropriate importation forms approved, arranging with shipper, all kinds of red tape. There's a lot involved in it. So it's not as simple as you just opening an office, putting a signboard and say, I am an oil and petrol importer. It's not that straightforward. Now, I know the NNPC said when the regulation occurred and subsidy was removed, because NNPC has been the sole importer. At that point, they said, and I believe this is part of the Petroleum Industry Act that was passed, is that they will open up the door to qualified marketers to import fuel. So, but there has to be a vetting process, not just any Tom, Dick, and Harry can be allowed to start getting involved in that business. So I do believe licenses will be issued for even they're probably already starting to issue them so that independent people can begin to bring petrol in. When that happens, we begin to see competition. And what does competition do? It drives prices down. So we look forward to such a time when a lot more people, a lot more entities, commercial entities will be able to bring in fuel because it'll be better for us all the way around.
All right. When this administration really they entered, they talked about removing subsidy, which the former president already started. Now, is the former president recently broke his silence about what people are saying, questioning him that he just took the current administration few days to do what the other government could not do. He said that they couldn't remove the subsidy then because they wanted APC to win. What do you think about the statement?
I think that's a very untoward and cowardly position to take. I think if you've had a policy that you believe is best for Nigerians, as you tried to sell it to us at that time, that look, in the long term, it's best for all of us as a people that this subsidy is removed. It's to our benefit. If you really believe that and you stood by it, you would roll the dice and you would go with your conscience. You won't. It's a manipulative thing to do. Essentially, what he has done is he has put the lives of 200 million Nigerians on hold because of one man. I don't think that's fair. I think if subsidy removal was going to come, if you championed it, if you actually did the paperwork and went through the process of removing it, I don't think you should have now got to the 99th hour and now suspended it to give undue advantage to your party person at the detriment of all Nigerians. The reason it looks a bit schizophrenic is because ultimately the fuel subsidy removal has impacted us negatively. So the idea is that the person who did it is the bogeyman. The person who did it is the bad guy. So you ask yourself the question, is it that he didn't want to be viewed negatively in terms of his legacy? Is it that he didn't want to deal with any potential fallout? Well, look at the person who ended up doing it. He has managed the process in such a way that Nigerians have come to terms with it. You don't see any unrest. Yeah, you hear complaints. Nobody's really happy. You hear belt tightening measures and complaints about how expensive things are, but everybody's going on about their lives normally. Life continues. So if you had the courage to take such a decision, such a policy decision, I don't think it was justifiable, and I don't think in any good conscience anybody should have put it on hold for a tactical advantage for your fellow party member. And worse off, I don't even think it's something you should brag about. Even if you did it, it should be in the corner of your bedroom that you are praying God for forgiveness for putting 200 million lives at ransom because you want one man to have an outright advantage. I don't think you should come out and brag about it and say, I didn't do petroleum subsidy during my time so that Tinubu would win the election. So who's got egg on his face now? Tinubu has done it, and there's no undue unrest that could have caused election. If he had managed it as well as President Tinubu has managed it, people would have accepted it and moved on. And then, by now, maybe if he had done it in his time, maybe by now, things would have started to improve already. Because ultimately, the goal is that, there will be some belt tightening measures in the beginning. But by and large, by the time they start giving cushioning measures and doing various interventions, things should get easier for all of us. Maybe it would have been like that already by now. So I wasn't happy when I heard that statement.
Let's talk about, we know that monthly there's a budget that is taken to petrol, that was taken for petrol subsidy. Now, NNPC sometime last month came out to say that the federal government is still owing them the sum of 2.8 trillion naira that they've not paid. Some people are saying now that this federal government should make sure that people, who did this should be brought to book. But of course, we've always been hearing that. So do you think this current administration will go ahead with it?
Well, they say when you fight corruption, corruption fights back. And of course, you are fighting very powerful entities. And when they decide to fight back, they're quite a formidable force. But without a doubt, we should go after subsidy thieves, anybody who took a kobo that didn't rightfully belong to him. We heard stories of people putting in paperwork for having imported millions of liters of fuel when they didn't import a drop of fuel. I mean, I remember the former CBN governor, not the immediate past one, but the one before him, talking about on his desk on a given day, he could have 10 different bills of lading or invoices that showed that 10 ships came in the same day and 10 ships can't berth and offload at Apapa ports in one day. It's not possible. You can probably even do one ship in a whole day. So how has he got invoices showing him that 10 ships came and unloaded the same day? So most of these things were fake, but I blame our weak institutions. I don't think we as Nigerians as a whole should have to pay a price because our government cannot enforce honesty and integrity. So when we have all these loopholes in the subsidy regime that allows people to steal, that allows people to make false claims, that allows people to collect money that they did not earn, we are the ones, we the ordinary everyday Nigerians are the ones who suffer for it. So I put the blame back at the feet of government that how can you not plug the loopholes? Why? Because government themselves are complicit in the conspiracy. Do you think it's possible for anybody to file paperwork about importing oil that they didn't import? Where were the inspectors? Who took delivery of the load? Who signed off on it? Who did this? Who transported it from you? There's so many checkpoints along the way that it's almost impossible for you to do it without the active connivance of insiders within the government because they're all sharing the loot. So the question is, who polices the police? If the police themselves have their hands in the cookie jar, who is going to bring the police to book? So it's the government, solely at the feet of the government. Does this new administration have the political will not only to go after those who have stolen in the past, but to plug the loopholes? Well, first of all, they've removed subsidy anyway.
Okay.
So the government is not paying anything to anybody anymore. You import your thing, you sell it at your markup, you collect your profit at the pump. No longer at the CBN or at the Accountant General's office. You collect your profit at the pump from each person who buys. So at least going forward, that issue of theft has been put to bed. The question is those who stole in the past, the 2.3 trillion, they're saying we still owe marketers who imported in the past. There needs to be a vetting process. They should audit the process and find out which of those claims is genuine and which is not. And then in those who have stolen in the past should all be gone, and they should go after them and bring them all to book, prosecute them, make them pay back, and perhaps even lock them up too.
All right, still talking about oil, the Commandant General of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, Dr. Ahmed Abubakar Odi, he has read the riot hard to oil thieves in the country, vying to deploy newly trained men and newly acquired assets after them. He said they've trained over 10,000 personnel in weapon handling. We've been hearing this riot ad reading for a long time. What do you think about what they say?
Well, the NSCDC's primary mandate is protection of critical assets. Yes. They are not particularly law enforcement per se in terms of lives and property, but they are sort of the security guards for the nation's critical assets. So really, oil pipelines and oil installations, oil facilities come under their jurisdiction. So what their head is saying now is that they are ramping up all efforts now that in the past, it's usually been the military, the police that have been at the vanguard of this fight against oil theft. But he's now saying that the Safety Commission and Civil Defense Corps is going to get seriously involved in the fight. So they've put money, they've trained people, they've bought equipment for them, and they're going out on an all-out onslaught. Because the truth is, oil theft is destabilizing to the entire country because that's where we get our sustenance from. The majority, the larger part of our revenue generation comes from oil sales. So when that oil is being stolen and the proceeds being diverted, it reduces what is available to every Nigerian for daily sustenance. All the key social services that government provides, from health, education, roads, bridges, even security, all those things are affected by virtue of the fact that the money that should accrue to government's coffers is being reduced dramatically by this issue of oil theft. So when he's saying, we're reading the Riot Act, we're coming after you, yeah, it sounds like a broken song. We've heard it over and over. We've heard it. This is the first time I'm hearing it from the NSCDC. But we've heard it from the police, we've heard it from the army, and at the end of the day, these things keep happening. And it goes back to what I said earlier. If they're going after oil thieves, they should look at the insiders. There's nobody that's stealing oil. I saw a video of the MD of NNPC, I think Mele Kyari or somebody. He went with some people on a field tour, and in the middle of this massive pipeline that's running from Bonny to some place somewhere, they've attached bypass pipes so that the oil that's flowing legally, when it gets to that point, it gets bypassed. And you can look at the installation of the diversion. I know it was a professional job. And you know that there are people who are monitoring and observing the main pipeline. Can you say they haven't seen these diversion pipes all this time? Can you say that thing was put in place without the authorities who are in charge of that pipeline not knowing? So I think we need to look inwards first. NSCDC, you want to fight oil thieves, look within those who are responsible in the oil sector first. All the small militants in the Niger Delta, they don't have the capability to steal thousands and thousands and thousands of barrels of oil. It's not possible. They take a few buckets, a few bucket loads. But to divert a tanker load of oil, it's not beans. It's not what an amateur can do. It requires technical expertise. So there are insiders involved. So my advice to the Civil Corps the Civil Defense Corps MD is that he should clean out his house first. It's an audience stable. They should look inside and do house cleaning internally first before you start going after all the small boys outside.
Let's move away from that. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu yesterday warned against the social and structural stigmatization of drug use victims. According to him, it prevents the victim from accessing needed care and support. This is coming from President Tinubu.
Yes, that's he's actually very, very much on point, because we have a festering drug problem in this country among the youth. You hear all kinds of names you've never heard before, loud and tramadol and all kinds of mad things out there. Yes, that our youth are inhaling, they are smoking, they are swallowing, they are drinking, and it's having a debilitating effect on their psyche. And the problem, of course, is what the president was talking about, is that these youth need help. They need enlightenment, they need rehabilitation, they need treatment. Let's not laugh at them, let's not stigmatize them, let's not ostracize them. Because, like when we were growing up, for example, in Nigeria in the 60s and 70s, if you knew somebody was an Indian hemp smoker, you stayed so far away from him them, because it was a negative, it was a bad thing. In Yoruba they say, that hemp smoker. And it was a bad, really bad thing. But what the president is saying is, in those days when we would stigmatize people, those days are long gone. Now it is a major social and economic and health crisis, that what we need to do is embrace victims, because a lot of the youth get into this thing based on peer pressure. They really don't know the addictive effects of some of these things. They think it's a joke. They think, oh, I can just get high with my friends, we have a nice time, and life goes back to normal. It's after they're in it that they realize they're hooked and they can't get off. So what the president is saying is, let's not alienate them. Let's not ostracize them. Let's not stigmatize them. Let's embrace them with love. Let's recognize the fact that anybody can slip and fall. And rather than kick a person when he's down, what you should do is try and lift him up, because this problem concerns all of us. It could be my kid tomorrow, it could be your kid tomorrow, it could be, because it's a societal menace. It is really a problem. And so that the best way, the quickest way to solution is to approach it from a compassionate and health related approach than, say, punishment. Because in places like America, they started out with, the iron rod. They catch you high, they catch you, you test positive for drug substance abuse, they lock you up. So what he's saying is, what our president is saying, the solution is not to lock people up. The solution is not to abandon people, not to laugh at people, but let us be humane about it. The nature of the problem is one whereby the victims are usually vulnerable. They are not necessarily bad people. They just fell into a trap, and what they need is help, and not punishment or derision or belittlement. So I have a tendency to agree with him, because I think if something is not done, it could spiral out of control to where we have a wasted generation completely.
What do you have to say about the rehab centers in Nigeria? No. So in terms of the rehab system, what do you think the country can do better?
That's a very tricky question, because the ultimate solution is rehabilitation, and there are clinical methodologies to rehabilitate people. In some cases, you lock them up in a room until they have withdrawal symptoms, they are sweating, and until the addiction is gone. In some cases, they give them a placebo, which is something similar to the drug, but it doesn't have the drug effects until their body adjusts to the fact that it no longer has that chemical in its system. There are very many different interventions in terms of rehab. And at the end of the day, it's a commitment. I think from what the president said yesterday, I think he put his money where his mouth is. As with all things, as with all interventions and solutions, it requires money. But first, you have to have a commitment. And I think that's what the president did yesterday, was to say, we have to address this frontally. So he said it now, he needs to put money behind it. I think we have the healthcare sector that's robust enough to be able to address it once it is made a priority and it is given adequate funding. I'm not sure we have that many rehab centers in Nigeria, but it's not to say we don't have the healthcare professionals who can deal with this if they are given the infrastructure. So it's just a matter of committing more money, greater budget to health, and a focus on this aspect of drug abuse, because it's generally overlooked as not a major healthcare issue. We are more concerned about dialysis centers, cancer centers, accident and emergency, orthopedic, cardiology. Those are the things that we focus on, because those are the things that kill people. But drug abuse unattended not just kills the individuals, but also everybody around them is affected. Drug abuse is really a major scourge, and I pray that none of any of our people ever get caught victims, because, boy, it's the quickest way to wreck a life.
Yes, it is indeed. Let's end this on a lighter note, Mr. Dio, with Mr. and Mrs.
Yeah.
And the first person speaking this morning is Mrs. Mrs. says, I spent part of the money you gave me for housekeeping on clothes and shoes. So what are you going to do? Call the EFCC? And Mr. replied, that won't be necessary, as my wife, you are permanently under house arrest.
Okay, EFCC, that's what they do. They put people under house arrest who misappropriate money. So Mrs. has misappropriated the housekeeping money to go and buy clothes and shoes. So she'll get the EFCC treatment.
Especially not now when people are complaining of what is going on.
You know.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Dio, for joining us this morning.
Pleasure is all mine.
And this is where you have to draw the curtain. My name is Damlola Okumshaki. Do want to like and follow us on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, our WhatsApp number is also displayed on your screen. Have a lovely Tuesday.